Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Monday, March 2nd, 2026, and I think it's safe to say we're working up to a completely different world today.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely not an exaggeration. The geopolitical landscape has just totally transformed over the weekend.
Right. And if you've been doom scrolling since Friday evening like I have, you know exactly what we are looking at.
Oh, I was glued to my phone all weekend.
Yeah, it went from tense to just catastrophic in what, 48 hours?
Pretty much.
Iran launched these retaliatory strikes, but the thing is, they didn't just go after military targets. They went straight for the economic pressure points.
Which is the massive differentiator here. This wasn't some symbolic, show of force in the desert.
Right, they hit Ras Tanura.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The oil refinery in Saudi Arabia.
Which, just for anyone who maybe doesn't follow global energy infrastructure closely, that is a huge deal.
It's one of the largest refineries in the world. And the reports this morning are confirming the Saudis have actually had to shut it down.
Completely shut down. So obviously, we're probably looking at the news, seeing the smoke over the Gulf, and wondering if this is the start of World War III.
It's the logical question to ask right now.
It is, but for this deep dive, we have a very specific mission. We really want to get past the military headlines and look at the numbers.
Because there is an economic avalanche that got triggered this weekend.
Yes, and most people haven't even felt the first tremors yet.
Right. The military stuff is what gets the clicks, but the economic subtext is where the actual history is being written today.
So to help us make sense of all this, we are diving into a really fascinating and frankly pretty terrifying discussion between political economist Glenn Deason and market analyst Alex Craner.
And Craner is a fantastic source for this because of his background.
Yeah, he's a former hedge fund manager, right?
Right. He is a trend-following expert. He literally specializes in tracking how massive amounts of money move, especially during wartime.
And we need that perspective right now because financial markets, well, they react a lot faster and a lot more brutally than diplomats do.
They don't care about the politics or the optics. They only care about risk.
Yeah.
And Craner's analysis is pointing to this incoming hockey stick spike in oil prices.
A hockey stick spike, that visual alone is wild.
Yeah, and it's a spike that he argues could basically bring the European economy to its knees and maybe even end the Trump presidency.
Okay, so we have a massive amount of ground to cover. Let's start with the immediate market reaction. It's Monday morning, the markets are open. What is happening?
Well, the screens are completely red, or I guess bright green if you happen to be holding oil futures.
Right.
So Friday's close for a barrel of crude was sitting around $73.50.
Okay.
By the time trading opened this morning, we were already pushing $80.
Wow, so that's almost a 10% jump right out of the gate.
It's a massive, violent move. But Craner brings up this highly technical but really crucial point about the underlying algorithms.
The trend-following algorithms he uses.
Exactly. These are basically complex math models that strip out the daily noise to find the actual momentum of the market.
Okay.
And before this weekend even happened, the market was already climbing out of a low in the 60s.
So the price was already slowly creeping up.
Right. But this geopolitical shock, this was the gasoline on the fire. Craner's algorithms have now officially flipped to a hard uptrend.
Let me stop you there, just so we don't lose anyone in the trader jargon. Why does the official uptrend label matter so much?
Because it changes the physics of the market.
The physics.
Yeah, think of it like a freight train. When a train is stopped, it takes an immense amount of energy to get those wheels turning.
Sure.
But once that train is barreling down the tracks, trying to stop it is almost impossible.
It just crushes whatever gets in its way.
Exactly. When the market officially enters an uptrend, the psychology flips. The big money goes from wait and see to buy now or we miss out.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
We are looking at $80 a barrel. We have been at $80 before.
Many times.
Right, we've even been over 100. It hurts when you go to the gas station, absolutely. But it doesn't cause the collapse of Western civilization. So why is Craner sounding the alarm over $80 oil?
Because the $80 is just the starting gun. And this brings us to the real aha moment of this entire deep dive.
The shadow banking system.
The shadow banking system.
Which, I have to say, always sounds incredibly ominous. Like guys in trench coats making deals in a parking garage.
I know, it's a terrible name for it because it's actually incredibly mundane.
So what is it exactly?
It is the collective term for all the massive financial institutions that hold and invest money, but aren't your standard traditional banks.
So we're talking about things like pension funds.
Pension funds, hedge funds, university endowments, insurance companies.
Okay, so this is the institutional money. This is where our 401ks live.
It is the biggest money on the planet. Craner points out that these entities control an estimated $220 trillion globally.
220 trillion. I mean, you can't even visualize that number.
It's an absolute ocean of capital. It's the bedrock of the entire Western financial system.
Right.
So put yourself in the shoes of a portfolio manager for one of these massive pension funds. Your entire job is to protect that wealth.
Okay.
For the last 30 or 40 years, where has the safe place been to park that money?
Government bonds, tech stocks, real estate.
Exactly. Paper assets, things that exist digitally.
Right.
But now you wake up this morning, you see Ras Tanura on fire.
Yeah.
You see that the Strait of Hormuz, which is the absolute jugular of global energy, is effectively closed off.
Because of the conflict.
Right. And you look at your portfolio, which is full of tech stocks and government bonds, and you realize those are incredibly vulnerable to inflation and wartime disruption.
So you panic.
You panic, and you look for a hedge. You look for something real.
Physical commodities.
Yes. You decide you need exposure to energy right now to protect your fund. And here is where Craner's math gets genuinely terrifying.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Imagine a standard bathtub. That bathtub represents the entire physical oil market, every barrel pumped, every futures contract available to buy.
Got the bathtub in my head.
Now imagine a cruise ship.
Okay.
That cruise ship is the $220 trillion sitting in the shadow banking system.
Oh, wow. I see where this is going.
If even a fraction of a percent of that cruise ship decides it wants to get into the bathtub,
It obliterates the bathtub.
completely, the water explodes everywhere. There is simply not enough paper oil in existence to satisfy that level of institutional demand.
So if the shadow banks flood in, they overwhelm the market instantly.
Instantly. It's too much money chasing a finite physical good. And that is what creates the hockey stick effect on the price chart.
It doesn't climb, it just goes vertical.
Right. Craner points out that $100 a barrel is old news. We hit 120 back in 2021 without a regional war.
So what is his prediction now?
He's suggesting we could easily see $200 or even $300 a barrel.
$300 a barrel. Let's just pause on that number.
It's staggering.
Because I think a lot of us hear $300 oil, and we just think about the gas pump. Like, okay, gas is going to be $12 a gallon, off to take the bus.
Right. People think of it as a commuting inconvenience.
But it goes so much deeper than that, doesn't it?
It affects everything. We live in a hydrocarbon civilization, period.
Yeah.
The microphone you're speaking into, the clothes on your back, the fertilizer used to grow the food in your fridge, it's all made from oil or transported by oil.
And Craner made this really profound point about how we measure economic value relating to this.
The multiplier effect, yes.
Can you break that down? Because I found that fascinating.
Sure. He points out that pure manual labor, just a human being working with their hands, creates a very small fraction of economic value compared to work aided by hydrocarbons.
So a guy with a shovel versus a guy with a diesel backhoe.
Exactly. Craner puts the multiplier at roughly 50 times. Oil allows a human to do 50 times more work. It is the master lever of human productivity.
So if you suddenly curtail the flow of oil,
You don't just make things expensive, you physically shrink the economy.
you remove the lever.
Yes. Factories have to shut down because they can't afford the power. Supply chains freeze because trucking companies can't afford the diesel to move food from the farms to the cities.
It's not a financial recession at that point.
No, it's an economic seizure.
Which brings us to the region that Craner identifies as the absolute most vulnerable in this entire scenario.
Europe.
Europe. Now, they've been having energy issues for a while, but Craner characterizes this as a largely self-inflicted crisis.
And the source material is quite explicit about why.
Right, because of the shift away from Russia.
Exactly. Over the last few years, European leadership made a deliberate strategic choice to cut off Russian hydrocarbons.
Which they labeled as dirty or, politically
way.
toxic.
Right. And they decided to reorient their entire industrial base toward what they started calling democratic hydrocarbons.
Meaning liquid natural gas from the U.S. and gas from Qatar.
Precisely. They spent billions building new LNG terminals. They signed massive long-term contracts.
But Craner points out the geographic flaw in that plan.
It's a fatal flaw right now. Look at a map. For Qatari gas to reach Europe, it has to sail right through the Strait of Hormuz.
The exact same choke point that Iran has just effectively shut down.
Exactly. They traded a direct, overland pipeline connection with their neighbor, Russia.
For a maritime shipping route that goes straight through an active war zone.
And now that war zone is on fire.
So Europe has no backup plan.
None. The entire German manufacturing model, which was the engine of Europe, was built on cheap, reliable energy. If you take that away, the model collapses.
Craner uses a historical analogy for what Europe is facing that honestly gave me chills.
The Weimar and Soviet comparison.
Yeah. He says Europe is looking at a mix of the Weimar Republic and the collapse of the Soviet Union.
It sounds incredibly extreme.
It does. I mean, when you say Weimar Republic, you're evoking images of people pushing wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread.
Hyperinflation.
Right. To say the European Union is heading for hyperinflation feels like a massive leap.
It feels like a leap until you look at the bond market.
Okay, let's get into the bond market, because this is where Craner's expertise really shines.
This is the mechanism that triggers the collapse. And Craner points to a very specific recent signal that shows the people at the very top of the financial system know this is coming.
You're talking about Christine Lagarde.
The president of the European Central Bank.
She just announced she's retiring.
Stepping down a full year early in 2026.
Which, when the captain is looking for a lifeboat before the ship has even hit the iceberg, that is not a great sign for the passengers.
Not at all. And Craner digs into a speech she recently gave at the Munich Security Conference that explains why she's leaving.
What did she say?
She essentially broadcasted a deep structural fear that European government bonds are going to be dumped at fire sale prices.
Okay, we really need to unpack this for you listening, because the bond market can be so opaque. Why is dumping bonds such a catastrophic event?
Let's simplify it. Think of a government bond as a country's credit score and credit card rolled into one.
Okay.
Modern governments don't run on the cash they have on hand. They run on debt. They issue bonds to borrow money to pay for everything.
Hospitals, roads, military, pensions.
All of it. And in return, they promise to pay the investor back over time with a little bit of interest.
Standard borrowing.
Right. But what happens if the global market looks at Europe right now? They see an energy crisis they can't fix, an industrial base shutting down, and a war on their periphery.
The market gets spooked.
The market says, I am not lending you money at 3% interest anymore. You are too high of a risk. You might not even be economically viable in a decade.
So the investor starts selling off the European bonds they already own?
Exactly. And when everyone runs to the exit at the same time, the value of those bonds plummets. They get dumped at fire sale prices.
And what does that do to the governments trying to run their countries?
It chokes them out. Because to attract any new money to keep the lights on, those governments now have to offer astronomically higher interest rates.
So instead of paying 3% on their national debt, they might have to offer 10 or 12%, just to get anyone to buy the bond.
Right. And just like a person with a maxed out credit card, suddenly the interest payments alone start consuming your entire national budget.
You can't afford to fix the roads because you're just paying interest to bondholders.
Exactly. And Craner's overarching point here is that the European economy is not growing fast enough to actually pay those higher rates physically.
So what is their only option?
The European Central Bank has to step in as the buyer of last resort. They have to literally print new money to buy their own government's debt because the free market refuses to.
And if you start printing trillions of euros just to pay your own internal bills,
you are entering Weimar territory. You are actively devaluing your currency towards zero. That is the hyperinflationary spiral Craner is warning about.
And what makes this so surreal is the political rhetoric coming out of Europe right now.
Oh, the disconnect is stunning.
You have Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, basically pitching rearmament as the economic revival plan.
Right, the idea that building a war economy will save them.
Yeah, she's basically saying, hey, we'll just build a ton of tanks and artillery, and that will stimulate the manufacturing sector.
And both Deason and Craner view that as an utter delusion.
Why?
Because you cannot build a military-industrial complex on top of a collapsing energy base.
It takes energy to build weapons.
Massive amounts of it. You want to build a tank, you need forged steel.
Yeah.
Forging steel requires blast furnaces that run on continuous intensive energy.
Which they no longer have cheap access to.
Right. If you don't have the gas, you don't have the steel. If you don't have the steel, you don't have the tanks. You can't just mandate a war economy into existence with a speech.
It's just politically magical thinking.
Exactly.
And when you look at the optics of the leadership trying to manage this, Craner makes a really sharp observation about the current alliance.
Ah, yes, the dream team.
Right. So you have President Trump, who is back in office, And he is now flanked by leaders like Macron in France, Keir Starmer in the UK, and Friedrich Merz in Germany.
Right, an alliance of leaders presiding over economies that are all simultaneously faltering.
And Craner points out the incredible irony here. For the last couple of years, Europe has been throwing a parade, celebrating how they liberated themselves from dependency on Russian energy,
Right, they were so proud of breaking that tie.
only to wake up today and find themselves totally dependent on the Middle East, a region that is currently exploding.
And totally dependent on an ally, the United States, that is actively dragging them deeper into that exact conflict.
They basically jumped out of the frying pan and straight into the volcano.
That's exactly what happened.
Now, speaking of the U.S. and these alliances, Craner takes the deep dive into the geopolitical realignment. And this is where things get really complex for the Trump administration.
Because this conflict represents a massive pivot from what Trump originally promised.
Right. Trump's stated goal, his campaign rhetoric, was all about breaking the post-World War II global order.
He wanted to embrace a multipolar world.
Yeah, he wanted to cut deals with Russia, focus on the domestic border, and end the endless foreign entanglements.
But Craner argues that by launching this strike on Iran, Trump has basically hit the reset button in the worst way possible.
You got pulled back in.
He got pulled back by gravity into the traditional, what Craner calls the colonial alliance structure.
The U.S., the UK, France, and Germany.
I guess everyone else. The West versus the rest.
And Craner says this is a fatal pivot because it's fracturing the world into two very hard, very distinct blocks again.
It's a new Cold War,
Mm.
but the foundational balance of power is completely different this time around compared to the Soviet era.
How so? Walk us through the two blocks.
Okay, so look at the Eastern Bloc. Russia, China, India, Iran, the broader BRICS coalition.
What do they have?
They hold the majority of the actual physical stuff that makes the world function.
Resources.
Diverse, critical resources. They have the coal, the nuclear technology, the oil, the natural gas, and the rare earth minerals required for modern electronics.
They have the physical commodities.
Right. Now look at the West. What does the West have?
We have the finance.
We have the shadow banking system.
Right.
We have the $220 trillion of investable assets.
But as we just established with the bathtub analogy, you can't eat a derivative contract.
Exactly. The West holds paper wealth, while the East holds physical wealth.
And the West is rapidly losing its hegemony over the Middle East, which used to be our guaranteed energy piggy bank.
Right, that leverage is gone. And Craner also brings up the technology gap, which is something we in the West don't like to talk about.
Yeah, we tend to assume we are always technologically superior.
But it's just not true across the board anymore. Take nuclear energy, for example. The U.S. has nuclear technology, obviously, but Craner points out that our deployment is incredibly expensive, bogged down in regulation, and actually lagging decades behind Chinese innovations in terms of next-generation reactors.
So we are facing off against a bloc that has more resources, cheaper energy, and in some sectors, better tech.
That's a severe strategic disadvantage.
And this leads Craner to make a historical comparison that is just, well, it's the most chilling part of the entire source material for me.
The Western Roman Empire scenario.
Yes. He compares what the West is risking right now to the total collapse of Rome.
And he's very specific about what kind of collapse he means. He's not just talking about one emperor getting assassinated and replaced by another.
Right, he's talking about a complexity collapse.
Exactly.
What does that actually mean for the average person? What is a complexity collapse?
It means that the incredibly intricate, interconnected systems that sustain an advanced civilization simply become too expensive to maintain, and they break down.
So the infrastructure fails.
Right. Think about the late Roman Empire. It wasn't just a political shift. The actual ability to maintain long-distance trade routes evaporated.
The roads stopped being safe.
The roads deteriorated, the centralized markets vanished, the currency became worthless. Society essentially fractured and reverted to highly localized, self-sustaining communities.
People went from enjoying aqueducts and global trade to basically living on dirt floors and bartering for grain.
Because the complexity of the empire couldn't be funded anymore.
And Craner is suggesting we are on that exact same precipice. We go from Amazon Prime and digital banking to a barter economy.
It sounds like a dystopian movie, but follow his logic.
Okay.
If the bond market breaks, as we discussed with Europe, the currency breaks.
Because of hyperinflation.
Right. If the currency breaks, global supply chains instantly stop. Because a shipping company in Asia isn't going to put a container on a boat if they don't know what the currency will be worth when it arrives in Europe.
The trust is gone.
And if the supply chains stop, Your local grocery store is empty in about 3 days.
Wow.
Craner's point is that a true civilizational decline can span centuries, sure, but the trigger that starts the cascade is usually a specific instance of geopolitical overreach that bankrupts the treasury.
And he believes the strike on Iran is that trigger.
He believes we are watching the trigger being pulled right now in real time.
That is just a massive amount to process. I mean, talking about a recession is one thing. Preparing for a complexity collapse is a whole different level of anxiety.
It's sobering, to say the least.
But we need to look closer at the immediate military trigger that started all this. Because, according to the sources, this whole escalation was based on a massive miscalculation by Washington.
A staggeringly dumb gamble is how Craner phrased it.
Right, so what was the logic inside the administration? Why did they think hitting Iran this hard was a good idea?
It's a strategy they've used before. It's often called the madman theory, or escalate to de-escalate.
Basically, punch them so hard they give up.
Exactly. The logic within the U.S. and Israeli leadership was that the Iranian regime was fragile.
Okay.
They believed that if they assassinated key leaders and hit critical economic pressure points like Ras Tanura, the government would just shatter.
And then what?
And then, theoretically, the Iranian people would rise up, overthrow the Ayatollahs, and welcome Western intervention with open arms.
Which Craner points out is entirely divorced from reality.
It's a complete fantasy. And the reality on the ground this weekend proves it.
The opposite happened.
Exactly. Iran didn't crumble. They unified.
Right, because historically, when a foreign power bombs your infrastructure, you don't blame your local mayor. You blame the people dropping the bombs.
It's human nature. It triggers a rally around the flag effect. They are dug in now.
And the sources mention this specific exiled figure that Western media has been pushing, the son of the Shah.
Yes. This is a perfect example of the delusion Craner is talking about.
How does he fit into this?
Well, he's a figurehead who has lived in the West for decades. And there were recent interviews where he was openly claiming that if the U.S. military installed him in power in Tehran, American corporations would immediately get trillions of dollars in business contracts.
It sounds like a sales pitch to defense contractors.
That's exactly what it was. And Craner immediately compares him to the Machado figure in Venezuela.
Ah, right, the U.S.-backed opposition leader there.
Exactly. It's this recurring Western delusion that you can just pick an exile, airdrop them into a volatile country, and the entire population will just fall in line.
It never worked.
It fails catastrophically every time.
But beyond the terrible political assumptions, Craner also digs into the actual physical logistics of this conflict.
The economy of war.
Right. We talked about the economy of oil, but fighting a war requires a supply chain too. And Craner argues the U.S. is at a severe structural disadvantage here.
Because of the geography. Iran has the ultimate home court advantage.
They are fighting from their own backyard.
Literally. They have a continuous 24/7 conveyor belt of drones and ballistic missiles. Their factories are right there. They can manufacture, move it to a launcher, and fire it on repeat.
And what about the U.S. forces?
The U.S. is projecting power across an ocean. So, yes, we have the most advanced naval vessels on Earth, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers.
The missile defense ships.
Right. But they have a hard physical limit. Magazine depth.
How many missiles they actually carry on board?
Exactly. A typical destroyer might carry, say, 90 interceptor missiles in its vertical launch tube.
Okay, so a swarm of drones comes in, they fire their interceptors.
And they are incredibly effective. But what happens when tube number 90 is empty?
They're out of ammo.
And they become a multi-billion-dollar floating target.
Can't they just bring a supply ship alongside and reload them in the Gulf?
No. That's the logistical nightmare. You cannot crane a massive, highly explosive missile into a launch tube while two ships are pitching and rolling in the open ocean. It's too dangerous.
So what do they have to do?
They have to sail completely out of the combat zone. They have to travel days away to a secure, deep-water port like the base at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean.
Just to reload.
Yes.
Which means the U.S. Navy lacks staying power.
Precisely. If Iran can simply fire more cheap drones, then the U.S. Navy has expensive interceptors. The U.S. eventually has to withdraw to reload. And when you withdraw, you lose control of the sea lanes.
That is a massive vulnerability.
It changes the entire calculus of naval warfare.
Now, speaking of the Navy, we have to talk about the anecdote Craner brought up regarding the USS Gerald Ford.
Oh, the plumbing issue.
Yeah. I honestly thought I was misreading the source material when I saw this. It sounds like something out of a bad comedy sketch.
It does sound ridiculous, but the implications are incredibly dark.
Okay, walk us through it. We are talking about the USS Gerald Ford, which is what, a $13 billion aircraft carrier?
The most advanced, expensive warship ever built by human hands.
And it is currently being defeated by laundry.
By T-shirts and socks.
Yes. How does that even happen?
Craner highlights these recurring reports that the advanced sewage system on the carrier is constantly backing up and failing.
Because the plumbing is faulty.
No, because the sailors on board are deliberately flushing unauthorized items down the toilets.
Yeah.
T-shirts, socks, rags.
Now, the Navy officially just calls that unauthorized disposal, right? Like it's an accident.
Right, bureaucratic language. But Craner calls it exactly what it is. Sabotage.
Sabotage. That is a very heavy accusation to level at U.S. service members. Sabotage implies a deliberate intent to disable the ship.
Look at the psychology of the situation. You are a sailor on that carrier. You are exhausted. You've been deployed for months. And now you are being sent into a drone swarm in the Persian Gulf.
To protect shipping lanes.
To fight a war that you might not fundamentally believe in.
Right.
Now, you can't just walk up to the captain and say, I don't want to do this, I'm not fighting.
No, that's mutiny. You go straight to the brig for that.
Exactly. But if a critical mass of toilets back up,
The ship has a critical sanitation failure.
yes, it becomes a severe biohazard. A $13 billion carrier cannot launch aircraft if there is raw sewage flooding the lower decks.
So the ship is forced to return to port for repairs.
And the sailors avoid the combat zone without ever having to officially refuse an order.
Craner called it soft mutiny.
Soft mutiny. And if he is right, if this is an intentional collective action by the crew, it suggests that there's a profound morale rot inside the U.S. military.
A rot that no amount of defense spending can fix.
Exactly. You can have the best technology on Earth, but if your own troops are quietly disabling the ship because they don't want to fight the war, you have already lost.
Wow. That is just, it's staggering.
It's a huge blind spot for Washington.
And that institutional paralysis is bleeding directly back into domestic politics. Because now, according to Deason and Craner, we are hearing the I word again. Impeachment.
Yes, the political fallout for Trump is accelerating rapidly.
But look, Trump has been impeached before. Multiple times. It never really stuck. It never removed him. Why does Craner think this time is going to be any different?
Because this time, the institutional rebellion isn't just coming from partisan Democrats. It's coming from inside the deep state. Specifically, the Pentagon.
The Pentagon is turning on him.
It appears that way. There are very credible reports surfacing right now that military leadership quietly informed Congress about the reality of the Iranian threat.
What did they tell them?
They briefed Congress that prior to the U.S. strike, Iran had absolutely no intention of attacking American forces unprovoked.
Oh, wow. That is a massive smoking gun.
It destroys the entire legal and moral justification for the assassination strike.
Because Trump's team was likely claiming it was a preemptive defensive move.
Right. But if the Pentagon tells Congress there was no imminent threat,
It frames Trump not as a commander defending the country, but as a rogue aggressor who illegally started a major war.
exactly.
Why would the Pentagon brass leak that, though? Why throw their own commander-in-chief under the bus?
Because the generals run the war games. They know the math, they see the magazine depth limits, they see the drone swarms, they see the soft mutiny.
They know it's an unwinnable quagmire.
They know a prolonged war with Iran would result in massive American casualties and potentially break the military.
So they want off the ride.
They want out.
Mm-hmm.
By feeding that narrative to Congress, the Pentagon is actively trying to distance the institution of the military from the catastrophe of this administration.
They are cutting Trump loose to save themselves.
That's Craner's read on it.
Yeah.
And he believes this permanently stains Trump's legacy.
Right. He ceases to be a controversial leader and just becomes a lawless rogue in the eyes of the international community.
Which is fatal for Trump's entire political brand.
Because his whole identity is the deal maker, the art of the deal.
But if you are universally viewed as a lawless rogue, your ability to make deals drops to zero. Who is going to negotiate a complex trade agreement with a leader who routinely violates international law and targets negotiators?
Which brings us perfectly into the final section of the source material. The optics of diplomacy.
This part is incredibly bleak, but essential to understand how the rest of the world is viewing this.
Craner mapped out a very disturbing pattern regarding these targeted assassinations.
Yes. It's not just that the U.S. and its allies are killing enemy leaders. It's when they are killing them.
Right. We saw this earlier with the Hamas negotiators in Oman.
And now we are seeing the exact same pattern with the Iranian leadership.
These strikes keep happening at the exact moment when diplomacy is supposedly working.
That is the crucial detail. Craner notes that in several of these instances, the leaders who were killed were allegedly in the process of accommodating Western demands.
So they were essentially saying yes to a deal.
Reports indicated that the Iranians were literally hours away from making massive concessions to avoid a wider war.
And then the negotiator gets blown up.
Right.
I mean, if you kill the guy sitting across the table right as he's reaching for the pen to sign the treaty.
You destroy the very concept of diplomacy for a generation.
Because why would anyone ever sit at that table again?
They won't. If accommodating the U.S. gets you assassinated, just as surely as fighting the U.S., there is absolutely no incentive to negotiate. It signals to the world that surrender doesn't even save you.
So the only rational choice left for these countries is to fight to the death.
Exactly. It boxes them in. And Craner points out how this makes the rhetoric coming out of Europe right now sound incredibly hypocritical to the rest of the planet.
Oh, the European response has been wild to watch. You brought up Friedrich Merz in Germany earlier.
Right. Merz put out a statement condemning Iran for its quote-unquote disproportionate retaliation.
Disproportionate. I mean, their economy was just attacked unprovoked, and they are literally fighting for their sovereign existence.
It's tone deaf. Or look at the demands that Iran must immediately dismantle its ballistic missile program.
Even though the ballistic missiles are the only thing keeping them from being completely overrun.
Right. They are actively winning the exchange of fire, and Europe is demanding they disarm. It's completely delusional.
Craner had a great term for this. He called it geopolitical virtue signaling.
That's exactly what it is. It's European politicians talking exclusively to their own domestic media bubbles.
They aren't trying to solve the crisis, they're just trying to sound tough for the voters at home.
Yes. But meanwhile, the global south is watching all of this play out.
Asia, Africa, Latin America.
They're watching closely. And they're taking notes.
And what conclusion are they drawing?
They are realizing that the so-called rules-based international order is a complete fiction. It only applies when it benefits Washington or London.
So the moral high ground of the West is basically gone.
It evaporated this weekend.
Okay. We have covered a massive amount of incredibly heavy material today.
I have.
I want to try and pull all these threads together for you listening, because it really feels like we are watching a car crash in slow motion right now.
That's a very apt description.
If Deason and Craner are right, what is the immediate takeaway? What should we expect in the coming weeks?
We need to brace for impact across multiple sectors. First, we are looking down the barrel of a triple-digit oil spike. And as we discussed, that doesn't just mean expensive gas. That means severe systemic inflation across the entire supply chain.
Groceries, manufacturing, logistics, everything gets more expensive or stops altogether.
Right. Second, we are watching the potential real-time collapse of the European bond market. If Lagarde's fears materialize and those bonds are dumped, it triggers a financial contagion that will absolutely spread to the U.S.
The hyperinflation risk.
Yes. And third, we are looking at an American administration that is completely paralyzed. A military that is softly mutinying, a Pentagon that is leaking against the president, and a diplomatic corps that has lost all credibility.
It is the absolute perfect storm. The attempt to reshape the Middle East by force has completely backfired.
It accelerated the exact outcome they were trying to prevent.
Instead of ushering in a new era of Western dominance, they might have just permanently cemented a two-block world.
A world where the West is financially bloated but completely starved of the physical energy needed to survive.
Which brings us to our final thought for the day. And this is something for you to just mull over because it builds on Craner's analysis but takes it to its ultimate logical conclusion.
The end game.
Right. We talked about that $220 trillion shadow banking monster.
A cruise ship trying to fit in the bathtub.
Exactly. For 40 years, our entire global reality has been built on financialization, on debt, derivatives, paper promises, and numbers on a screen.
It's an economy of abstractions.
But if that trust breaks, if those trillions of dollars suddenly panic and realize that physical assets are the only true safety left, are we watching the violent death of the financialized economy?
It's the ultimate pivot. moving from an economy of paper to an economy of things.
Because at the end of the day, you can't eat a treasury bond.
No, you can't.
You can't fuel a delivery truck with a hedge fund derivative. When the system cracks, the people who hold the actual physical stuff are the ones who survive.
The oil, the gold, the wheat.
Right. And going back to that terrifying Roman Empire comparison Craner made, if we really are on the road to a complexity collapse, what does a barter economy even look like in the 21st century?
That is the question that keeps me up at night.
I mean, do we end up trading coding skills for canned food? Are people going to be trading fractions of a Bitcoin just to get enough diesel to run a generator?
It strips away all the illusions. When the complexity vanishes, you find out very quickly what is actually essential for human survival.
And it turns out it's rarely what is sitting in your investment portfolio.
Definitely not. If there was ever a time to learn how to fix an engine or grow your own potatoes, Craner's timeline suggests it might be right now.
Well, that is a profoundly sobering place to leave it, but this was a deep dive we absolutely needed to have today.
I agree. It's better to look at the math now than be surprised by it tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thank you, as always, for guiding us through the chaos and for breaking down the numbers that the rest of us are too afraid to look at.
It was my pleasure. Stay safe out there.
Here. And to you listening, keep your eyes on the price of oil this week and keep your eyes on the horizon. We will be watching it right alongside you. That is it for today's deep dive. We will see you next time.